I didn't expect the worst betrayal of my life to arrive in a whisper, in a room that smelled like furniture polish and grief. The morning light slid across a mahogany desk, cold as a blade, and I braced my hands against a leather chair to stop them from trembling. My husband had been buried 2 weeks earlier. The ground over him was still fresh, the ache in me still raw. It should have been a day of gentle closure. Instead, it became the moment my son looked at me the way a stranger looks at an obstacle. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat and said, "Mrs. Henderson, your husband provided very well for you. The estate totals $42 million. And the number struck me like the slam of a heavy door. Harold had built his company beam by beam, invoice by invoice, carrying our future in the calluses of his hands. And yet I never counted the money, only the nights he came home late but smiling. I nodded because nodding was easier than breathing, and the attorney slid papers toward me with the slow, careful motions of a man handling crystal. The house, the business assets, the investments, he continued, everything is in your name. I felt for one suspended second the ghost of my husband's patience settle my shoulders, and then Darren spoke without looking at me, as if speaking to a clerk in a store. "Mom doesn't need all that," he said, and the coolness in his voice cut clean. He finally met my eyes and added, "You're already old. You should learn how to make your own money." The words didn't land. They detonated. "Darren," I whispered, my palms searching for my heartbeat, "your father left this to me." Meadow's perfume reached me before her voice did, a bright, chemical sweetness. She smiled without warmth and said, "Let's be practical, Dolores. What would a woman your age do with that kind of money? Play bingo until you forget your cards." The room shrank. The oxygen thinned. I looked for Mr. Peterson the way a drowning person looks for a shore, but he bent his gaze to paper like a man pleading neutrality. Darren pushed a pen toward me, its black barrel shining like a threat. "We'll transfer everything to Meadow," he said lightly, as if he were choosing a restaurant. "She's got the head for business. I'll make sure you have enough for a small apartment and basic expenses." I tasted metal and said, "This is what your father wanted." And my son answered, "Dad's gone, Mom. He doesn't want anything anymore." It should have ended there, in decency or in silence. Instead, Meadow leaned in on elbows that never had to carry a child and said, "We're doing you a favor. No pressure, no risk, no scam artists. A simple, quiet life." I thought of the life behind me, 42 years beside the same man, the mornings I ironed his shirts before dawn, the nights I kept coffee warm while he erased and redrew numbers until they behaved, and wondered when quiet became a synonym for erased. My grief fogged into something colder. I said, "I need time," and Meadow's smile sharpened as she answered, "There's nothing to think about. Sign and we'll take care of everything." I studied the papers. The words blurred, then steadied. I remembered the first apartment Harold and I had rented, the way the radiator rattled like a box of nails, the way we laughed anyway. I remembered the morning Darren learned to ride a bike and shouted, "Don't let go, Mom," and how I ran until my lungs burned and then let go because that is what love is. Holding, then trusting. I had never imagined the same boy would grow up to let go first. "Mom," Darren said, gentler now, as if softening the blow were generosity, "we'll cover your rent for 6 months. You'll be fine." 6 months sounded shorter than a winter. I reached for the pen. I wanted my husband to rise up from the paper and tell me what to do, but only ink waited for me. I signed because the room was full of witnesses, and yet I had never felt more alone. The nib scratched my married name into a future I didn't want. And when I looked up, Meadow's relief flashed across her face like triumph. When I left that office, the afternoon sun looked like a stranger wearing the mask of daylight, and the world I'd known thinned to a strip of sidewalk leading to a car that wasn't mine alone anymore. But between my ribs, something hard and bright refused to die. It was not anger, not yet. It was a promise. If they believed I would disappear quietly, they did not know the woman Harold loved for 42 years. The house did not fight for me when the movers arrived at 8 a.m. It yielded like a tired host, opening its cabinets and closets to strangers who wrapped my life in newspaper and tape. Meadow stood in my kitchen with a clipboard as if she'd been born with it, saying, "Be careful with those dishes," while pointing at my grandmother's china as though it were a catalog item. I said softly, "Those are heirlooms, Meadow, 3 generations." And she answered without even looking up, "Sentimental value doesn't pay bills, Dolores," then smiled a small smile I would come to fear. Darren drifted through rooms, avoiding my eyes, carrying Harold's books with the distracted focus of a man moving someone else's memories. When a jewelry appraiser arrived at 11 a.m., Meadow announced, "We need valuations for insurance," and I pressed my wedding ring with my thumb until it imprinted my skin. "These are mine," I said, and she replied, "They were purchased during the marriage, community property, as if love were a receipt." I looked to my son and begged, "Darren, please." And for a heartbeat, his jaw loosened, then Meadow touched his sleeve and the light went out. "Mom, you're being dramatic," he said, and the words fell between us like a door that would not open again. They handed me an address for a nice little place and a promise. 6 months' rent covered while I learned to stand in a life I had never chosen. "You'll find something part-time," Meadow chirped. "Walmart always needs greeters." And though I nodded, a piece of me went very still, the part that knew I would rather scrub floors at midnight than thank customers for bargains at noon. At 4 p.m., I watched strangers carry out Harold's leather recliner, the one that learned his shape, and his golf clubs he used more for talking with friends than for winning. The front door closed behind them, and the echo sounded like the end of a hymn. The apartment was beige the way silence is beige. Walls, carpet, cabinets, all the color of resignation. I woke at 6 a.m. for weeks, confused, reaching toward a window that wasn't mine, then made coffee that tasted like starting over, and clipped coupons with hands that used to set crystal for clients. I called old friends and heard how pity thins a voice. One afternoon, Eleanor asked brightly, "Dolores, we missed you at the club." And I said, "I'm making changes," because the truth, that my membership had been traded for an address across town, felt like confessing a failure I hadn't earned. At the grocery store around 10 a.m., I met Janet Morrison, who said, "Mrs. Henderson, I'm so sorry about Mr. Henderson," then added with genuine confusion, "But I heard Darren and Meadow were at the Ferrari dealership last month. They looked successful." I managed, "They are," and pushed my cart past the cereal as if cardboard could swallow humiliation. Later, I learned Meadow had been calling people to arrange help for me. A church program, utility assistance, a gentle chorus of charity for the woman who once hosted their galas. I stood at my kitchen counter and felt the slow burn of shame I had not invited. I phoned my son at 3 p.m. and said, "Meadow is telling people I need assistance." And he replied, "Because you do, Mom. You have no skills, no prospects." Then added, "Your job is over." And I understood that what I mourned was not only Harold, but the boy who had once cried on my shoulder in thunderstorms. I lay awake at 11 p.m., staring at a ceiling too close to my face, trying to imagine what kind of woman I had to become to survive the last rent check. And a thought slid into the room like a draft. Maybe Harold had seen this coming. Maybe he had made a plan I couldn't yet see. 6 months to the day after I signed those papers, a knock landed on my door at 9 a.m. Polite, measured, impossible to ignore, and something inside me stood up and braced for the truth. The man at my door looked like he belonged in another century. Silver hair neatly combed, suit pressed so sharply it caught the light. "Mrs. Dolores Henderson?" he asked, voice smooth and courteous. When I nodded, he smiled faintly. "My name is William Ashworth. I was your husband's personal attorney." Confusion tightened in my chest. "But Mr. Peterson handled the will," I said. "He did," Mr. Ashworth replied, stepping gently into my beige world. "The primary will. I was entrusted with something else." He set a leather briefcase on my small kitchen table, pushing aside my stack of job applications and unpaid bills. "I'm sorry for the delay," he continued. "Your husband gave me very specific instructions about when to contact you and under what conditions." My heart thudded. Conditions? He opened the case and drew out a folder thick with documents. 2 years ago, Mr. Henderson came to me, deeply worried. He said your son had changed, become obsessed with status and indifferent to you after his marriage to Meadow. He feared what might happen if Darren ever controlled the family's finances. I felt my throat close. Harold had noticed. He'd seen what I had chosen not to see. Mr. Ashworth unfolded a document and slid it toward me. "Your husband created what we call a conditional will," he explained. "Darren's inheritance was never permanent. It depended entirely on his behavior toward you during the 6 months following Mr. Henderson's passing." I stared at the neat black letters swimming on cream paper. "A test?" I whispered. "Precisely," he said. "If Darren treated you with kindness, ensured your comfort, and respected your position as his mother, the inheritance would become his forever. But if he abandoned you, humiliated you, or left you in hardship, the entire estate would revert to you, every cent." The words hit harder than any betrayal. "And if the condition isn't met?" I asked, voice trembling. "Then," Mr. Ashworth said, closing the folder softly, "you become the sole beneficiary of everything Harold built and more. You see, the $42 million was only the visible portion of his wealth. Your husband quietly established additional trusts and properties under other names, investments totaling roughly $60 million. I sat frozen as the world tilted. $60 million, I repeated. Mr. Ashworth nodded. "As of yesterday, the 6-month period has officially ended. I have verified your circumstances, your displacement, your lack of support, Meadow's public humiliation of you. I'm afraid your husband's concerns proved correct." My eyes stung with tears I didn't bother hiding. Harold had known. He had seen through the charm, the greed, the entitlement. He had protected me when I didn't even know I needed protecting. Mr. Ashworth continued, "Darren and Meadow are unaware of this clause. They've spent approximately $8 million in the past 6 months. Cars, jewelry, renovations. All of it must now be repaid with interest." I covered my mouth, half in shock, half in disbelief. "They'll have to return it?" "Yes," he said gently. "The estate's assets will transfer back to you immediately. Their spending was unauthorized. Technically, theft from the estate. We'll handle the legal side." Then he reached into the briefcase one last time and produced a sealed envelope. "Your husband also left you this letter, to be delivered only if the condition was triggered." My fingers shook as I tore it open. The familiar handwriting swam before me. "My dearest Dolores," it began, "if you're reading this, then our son has shown his true nature. I prayed I was wrong. You deserved better, but I knew I could not change him, only protect you. Remember, the money is just paper. You, my love, are everything that gave it meaning. Live freely and never doubt your worth." The words blurred through tears. "He knew," I whispered, clutching the letter to my chest. "He knew exactly what they would do." Mr. Ashworth stood, quietly gathering the documents. "He trusted that, when this day came, you would have the strength to take back your life." When he left, the door clicked softly behind him, but the silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It thrummed with something fierce and alive. For the first time in months, I stood tall in that beige apartment, feeling Harold's steady presence like sunlight returning after a long winter. At 7 a.m. 3 days later, my phone rang, and the moment I heard Darren's voice, panicked, unsteady, I knew the reckoning had begun. "Mom, something's wrong," Darren said, his voice sharp with panic. "The bank froze our accounts. They said there's a legal issue with Dad's estate. They're talking about some lawyer named Ashworth. Do you know who that is?" I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the warmth calm the tremor in my chest. "Yes, Darren," I said evenly. "I know exactly who that is." The silence that followed stretched long and thin. "What do you mean you know?" he finally demanded. I looked out my small kitchen window at the dull parking lot, the morning sun reflecting off car roofs, and felt something deep and steady rise in me. "Your father created a conditional will," I said. "The inheritance you and Meadow spent was never actually yours. It was a test, one you failed." I heard Meadow's voice in the background, sharp and shrill, asking what I'd said. "That's impossible," Darren snapped. "Peterson read the will. Everything went to you, and you transferred it to us." "I transferred what I believed was valid," I said. "But your father planned for this. The conditions weren't met. You mistreated me, abandoned me, humiliated me in front of everyone. The moment that happened, everything reverted to me. For a heartbeat, all I could hear was his breathing, fast, uneven, like he was trying to swallow disbelief. Then his voice cracked. "No, Dad wouldn't do that. He wouldn't, he broke off, and I could hear Meadow shouting something about lawyers, her voice fading into chaos. "He knew you better than I did," I said quietly. "He knew what kind of man you were becoming." "You can't do this," Darren finally said, but the defiance was gone. "Mom, we've spent money. We have obligations, payments." "Obligations you created," I said, "with money that didn't belong to you." I could picture Meadow pacing, her face contorted with fury, Darren's tie loosened, sweat on his forehead. "Please," he said, his tone cracking again. "We made mistakes, but we can fix it. We'll make it up to you. We'll buy you a house, give you an allowance, anything you want." "With my own money?" I asked softly. There was no answer, just Meadow shouting, "We'll fight this in court. We'll prove you manipulated Harold." I almost laughed. Good luck with that. Harold set everything in motion 2 years before he passed. Every meeting documented, every signature witnessed. This isn't manipulation, Meadow, it's consequence. When I hung up, I didn't shake. My hands were steady as I set the phone down. At 11 a.m., they came pounding on my door. Darren's voice pleading, Meadow's cracking under panic. I opened the door just enough for the chain latch to hold it in place. "Mom, please let us in," Darren said. "We just need to talk." Meadow's mascara was smeared, her composure gone. "Mrs. Henderson, we'll lose everything if you take this money back. Please, we're begging you." I studied them through the narrow opening, this couple who had once stood over me like royalty dividing spoils. "You should have thought about that before you threw me away," I said. "We didn't mean," Darren started, but I cut him off. "You meant every word. You called me old, worthless, told me to learn to make my own money. Now you will." Meadow pressed forward, desperation twisting her face. "We'll make it up to you. You can move back in. We'll redecorate, whatever you want." "The lawyers will be in touch," I said, closing the door. "You have 30 days to vacate my house." Darren's voice broke. "Mom, that's my childhood home." "And my marriage," I said softly. 40 years of it. It was never yours to give away." Their knocking grew frantic, then faded. When silence finally settled, I stood there for a long time, hand on the door, feeling something vast and still open inside me, a peace I hadn't known since Harold's death. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't revenge. It was justice finally breathing air. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood at the window and whispered, "We did it, Harold." The reflection that looked back at me wasn't the woman who left that lawyer's office trembling. It was someone steadier, sharpened by loss but no longer afraid of it, 6 months later, the garden behind my house bloomed brighter than I remembered. Morning sunlight spilled over the roses Harold had planted for our 20th anniversary, painting their petals in shades of forgiveness and fire. The house, our house again, had been stripped of every trace of Meadow's sterile perfection. Gone were the chrome fixtures and marble that had made it feel like a hotel lobby. In their place, I'd restored the warmth Harold loved: oak bookshelves, lace curtains, framed photographs that told the story of a life built on effort and love. The air itself felt different, lighter, honest. The legal process had been swift and merciless. Mr. Ashworth presented Harold's documents, every page airtight, every signature witnessed. Darren and Meadow had no grounds to contest the will. Within 60 days, the courts had ordered all assets returned to me. The luxury cars were repossessed, Meadow's jewelry seized. Even the renovations she had made were declared part of the debt. When the accounting ended, they owed nearly $12 million in total. 8 they'd spent, and 4 in interest, legal fees, and penalties. It was more than they would ever be able to repay. At first I thought the satisfaction would feel sweet. It didn't. It was quiet, heavy, like closing the final page of a painful chapter. Justice isn't loud. It's steady, patient, and irreversible. One afternoon around 3 p.m., I heard footsteps crunching along the stone path. Eleanor Hartwell appeared by the gate, clutching a handbag too tightly. Once she'd been my closest friend. Now she looked unsure whether she was welcome. "Dolores," she said, voice tentative. "Thank you for seeing me." I motioned her toward the bench beneath Harold's rose arbor. She sat, smoothing her skirt, her eyes glistening. "I owe you an apology," she began. "When Meadow called, she made it sound like you'd lost your mind. Said you were refusing help, that Darren was doing everything to protect you. I wanted to believe her. It was easier." I watched the way she twisted her wedding ring, realizing how guilt can age a person faster than time. "You believed her," I said softly. "So did many." Eleanor nodded, tears spilling freely now. "I was jealous," she confessed. "You and Harold had what I never did, a real marriage, built on love, not convenience. When I heard you were struggling, a part of me felt relieved. That's shameful to admit, but it's the truth." Her honesty disarmed me. For the first time, I saw her not as part of the cold social circle that had turned its back on me, but as another woman fumbling through loneliness. "You can't undo what happened," I said gently, "but you can choose who you'll be tomorrow." She nodded quickly. "If you'll have me as a friend again, I promise I'll be better this time." After she left, I walked through my house, tracing my fingers over Harold's books, my grandmother's china, the framed photo of Darren as a boy missing his front teeth. Each thing I'd reclaimed wasn't just property. It was proof that I had survived being erased. Over the next months, I rebuilt quietly. I joined a small library book club, not the country club circle, but women who read because stories gave them joy. I volunteered at a literacy center, helping adults learn to read, and for the first time, I saw my reflection not as Harold's wife or Darren's mother, but simply as myself. Dolores, 66 years old, still standing, still alive. The calls from Darren came for a while, pleading, angry, manipulative, but eventually stopped. Meadow filed for divorce, blaming him for everything. I didn't rejoice. I simply noted how greed consumes itself. Then, one warm evening near sunset, I saw a figure walking slowly up my driveway. Darren. He looked thinner, smaller somehow, his expensive clothes replaced by worn jeans and a wrinkled shirt. He paused at the foot of the porch steps. "Hello, Mom," he said quietly. I didn't invite him closer, just nodded. "You look good," he added, "happy." I closed my book and said, "I am." He stared down at his hands. "I've been thinking about Dad and what he did, about why." His voice trembled. He knew me better than I did. He saw who I was becoming. I was angry for months, but now I understand. He took a breath. I destroyed everything that mattered for something that never did, and I'm sorry. Not for losing the money. God, I don't even care about that anymore. But for what I did to you. You didn't deserve that. I studied him, searching for deceit, but found only defeat, the kind that rebuilds character. Your father loved you, Darren, I said softly. He hoped you'd pass his test. Darren nodded, eyes glistening, and I failed completely. He turned to go, then paused. He was right about something else, you know. You are the strongest person I know. I watched him walk down the driveway, the fading light stretching his shadow long across the path, and I realized I didn't feel anger or victory, only peace. Some bridges, once burned, should never be rebuilt. That night I sat in the garden surrounded by the scent of roses, the same flowers Harold once planted with dirt under his nails and laughter in his voice. I whispered, "We made it, love," and felt the wind move gently through the petals, as if answering. In the quiet glow of evening, I finally understood what freedom meant. It wasn't wealth or revenge. It was knowing my own worth, the kind that doesn't need validation, forgiveness, or permission. I had lost everything and found myself in the ruins. To everyone listening to my story, remember this. Sometimes life takes everything away, not to punish you, but to show you what can never be taken. Your strength, your dignity, your soul. If my story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more true stories like this. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my place? I'd love to hear from you.